It's Easter in 2007, and we're sitting around a table having dinner, Easter dinner. At the head of the table is Bart Anderson, my spiritual teacher of 22 years. And there's myself and two other students that were formally studying with him at the time. We were actually living there for about 2.5 years at this point. Very strict teaching during this time. And there's a few other people there as well. And about halfway through the meal that we had all cooked together, Bart starts, as he often did, Bart starts teaching. And on this Sunday, he was teaching about making a difference and social change and the importance of that in our current culture, just how much it was needed. And after he taught maybe 5-10 minutes or so, I kind of blurted out, I want to make a difference through psychotherapy. I was a trained psychotherapist at the time, and when I said it, it was just like, oh, that is, because usually when he was teaching like this, we were more listening, less talking. So he looked at me, and I was just, uh-oh. But he looked at me, and he just said, therapy is not enough. He said, you have to teach. And he said, that is why they come to you. And this caught me off guard, because this is kind of a big deal in this spiritual tradition, which the closest thing would be like a Zen tradition. And it's like when your teacher asks you to teach, he's kind of saying you're ready to teach. And in one sense, it's kind of like the end of your training with him, at the very least at the end of that phase of training. So I'm just like, holy crap, did he just say that? Did he just say what I think he said? Is kind of what's going through my head. And so what I said is I just said, wow, that's kind of surprising. I figured I wasn't really ready for that, because the way you've been teaching me, you've been pointing out just how off the mark I've been, just how I've been floundering, and how I've been, this is an illusion, and this was more ego driven. And he said, yes, I know. He said, but you've been hanging out with me long enough that the likelihood of you teaching going haywire is really pretty low. He said, the only thing that's really in your way is your own self-doubt. And he said, so what you really have to do is you just need to claim it and declare it. He said, you just need to say, you just really need to say is, I'm ready to teach. And then I just kind of stood there going like with big eyes, and then I realized he wanted me to say that, and so I said, I pulled up the whatever strength I had left, and I just said, I'm ready to teach. And he had a big smile. He had this big charismatic smile, and that signaled to me that this was kind of complete. This had become almost a ceremony, if you will. And he said, yes. He said, you have to teach people a new way of being. So this is even more profound, because about 3 months later, Bart Anderson passed away, which was very sad. But in a sense, it felt like it was time. His health was failing, and there was at least a sense, in some ways anyway, that he had kind of done what he had come here to do, at least has done as much of that as he was able to do at the time. And so I was left with that, okay, his life was fulfilled, but now it's my turn to fulfill my charge, this charge that he had given to me, of teaching people. And so I started, slowly but surely, I started trying this out for size, and I started teaching some classes. I started teaching workshops. I did some individual sessions, and beyond, and I did some therapy as well, but even beyond therapy, I was doing more of a teaching style of therapy, and I was exploring this. And so, it got discouraging in some ways. And the reason it was discouraging is, first of all, it was very humbling. And it was much easier. I mean, Bart was it was very natural for him. I suppose it wasn't at first, but toward the end, when my only memory is he did this very effortlessly, and it just kind of flowed through him in this beautiful way. And I found myself almost imitating him or trying to be him in a way, and that wasn't working out. So I was trying to get more authentic with it, which was challenging. Even more challenging was people weren't really showing up for my classes. At the very least, they weren't taking them very seriously. I'd do a 5-week class series, and they'd show up to the first one and the fourth one, and I'm just like, oh man, they're not taking it seriously, don't they? And to me, this work was like so important and so profound, and it just kind of broke my heart. It's like, so I figured I must be doing something wrong, and there was this feeling is that there's something missing, but I couldn't really put a finger on it. The only thing it felt like was that that the teaching I was doing was just getting kind of plastered over their life or their view of life, and it wasn't fitting, it wasn't integrating into their life correctly. See, and that was as much as I could figure out. Then one morning, so this went on for a while, and went on for one morning about 7 years after Bart passed. I woke up, and it was that first thought. I'm still lying in bed, and it was just like, I remembered the last thing he said to that charge. He said, you have to teach people a new way of being. And it was kind of like, I figured that is the missing element. And so how is that the missing element? Well, rather than plastering teachings on top of things, the thing that needed to happen is I had to teach people a whole new way of being. Now, what was this? This created a new exploration, but to make a long story short, or at least less long, is that I renamed my business Natural Way of Being, okay, Natural Way of Being Coaching, okay, and I started my workshops and I created programs and workshops that taught a natural way of being. So that's kind of how I reformulated it. So now, as I look forward to the present day, okay, it's now 2019, and a natural way of being is continuing to evolve, and now I've written a book called Natural Way of Being, and I'm learning how to tell stories for a natural way of being, this being one of them. And it's evolving. But the difference is now that I think I've experienced it enough that I can tell that it's happening, and it's going to happen. And this charge that I've taken on is going to fulfill itself. I have a few more people coming. I'm still working on getting more people there, but I can feel it and I can see it, and I have a strong sense. I just intuitively know that this thing's happening, and which is a huge sense of relief, and it's very fulfilling. I still have a lot of work to do, and so in retrospect, what I'm left with as I kind of look back at this process is that even in the kind of the dark times, if you will, even in that 7 years and that very frustrating time where things weren't going very well, I never even considered not doing it. It just never even occurred to me. I discontinued doing certain approaches, and it was very frustrating, but it never occurred to me that I would do something else. It just was, okay, what do I need to do to figure this out? And so it really became, it just was this deep purpose. It was this deep kind of reason for being, which in a sense was kind of, it felt like a mixed blessing, because in one sense I was very fortunate to know what that is, but in another sense, knowing what that was and was very painful, because I kept falling short of it, and it kept not fulfilling itself. So it was kind of something that I had to care about very deeply, to kind of, go to hell and back, basically, is what it feels like, what it felt like. And the other thing that I'm really left with, was just this relationship between Bart and myself, this kind of teacher-student relationship. And in one sense, it's almost like a love story in a way. It's just like two people, okay, cared so much, about making a difference and about teaching people a new way of being, that Bart cared so much that he taught me for 22 years. And he taught me enough to really hold my feet to the fire and to give me a charge, of like, go teach people a new way of being. And myself as well. I stayed there for 22 years. The last 2.5 of those years were very challenging and very confrontive, and the hardest thing, by far, the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And I stayed there, and then I went through those dark times, of figuring out how to do that. And it's hard to explain, but just how powerful that was, that got passed, that it was kind of a changing of the guard. It was kind of a passing, the Native Americans would say, kind of a passing of the medicine from one person to another, so it can live on. The Zen lineages talk about it too, which I've already referred to. And what a powerful thing, and how much love and how much caring that required. So you just have two people that cared a lot, and how that, I can just feel it in my heart, is going to be the foundation that more and more people will be touched by this.